So next up, we have to talk about the Orange Bowl. And Georgia, not only did they win this game, but they dominated. They probably should have put a parental warning on this game for all viewing audiences out there. They probably should have said rated R, because this game is going to be graphic, it's going to be gory, and boy, Georgia pretty much painted the Orange Bowl with Michigan's blood. And this game wasn't even close. And I was really disappointed because everybody was saying how this game was going to be one of the best semifinal matchups we've seen in a while, myself included. On top of that, I felt like both these two teams were pretty evenly matched going into this game. Alabama and Cincinnati we already knew that was a pretty big disadvantage when it came to the talent gap from Alabama to Cincinnati. But meanwhile, you look at Michigan and Georgia, they both have similar styles. They both have similarly constructed teams. At least we thought. And then Georgia comes in the first quarter. Stetson Bennett drives down the field. And I was really impressed with how Stetson Bennett played in this game. Like, Stetson Bennett has gotten a lot of criticism. A lot of people keep saying that he's not good enough to win a national championship for Georgia. I tip my hat off to Stetson Bennett in this game because he was something special. 3 touchdowns, 213 passing yards, 20 to 30 passing. Like, he was the star of this game. And if somebody was to tell you that the reason why Georgia was going to win this game was going to be because of Stetson Bennett, you probably would have said, "Are you serious? Really?" Now, I'm not saying that to insult Stetson Bennett because I know Stetson Bennett would have had a solid performance. But if you were to tell me that Stetson Bennett was going to throw for 303 touchdowns against Michigan's defense, I would have said you're crazy. Then I would have asked you, I would have said, okay, so what did Georgia do on the ground? Like, did Georgia have a 100-yard rusher? Like, did Georgia have a crazy day on the ground? Somebody would have said, no, like, Georgia was pretty good on the ground, but they didn't really need to run the football that much because they were so dominant throwing the football. Like, Georgia's dominance in the passing game really surprised me. And not because Georgia doesn't have the weapons. We knew Georgia had more than enough talent to be able to have a solid passing attack. I just didn't know if Stetson Bennett was going to be good enough to get the ball out to those guys like Brock Bowers and George Pickens. But he proved me wrong. And I'm really excited to see what he does against Alabama, if he's going to end up having a better performance the second go around compared to what he did in the SEC championship game. I was really impressed. And also, his mobility was on full display. There were a lot of times when he was rolling out the pocket, keeping plays alive, moving the chains with his legs. Like, he was really frustrating. And on top of that, you got to give a lot of kudos and a lot of props to the offensive line of Georgia, because they pretty much held Michigan's defensive line with David Ojabo and Aiden Hutchinson in check. They had no sacks. They pretty much weren't really in the backfield all that much in this game. Like, you didn't really hear Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo's name called all that much. Like, Georgia's offense was just purely dominant, and this was one of the best passing displays that I have seen from Georgia's offense against a marquee opponent in a very long time. Offensively, Michigan, they had to get away from their identity. We already knew once Michigan got down by 14 the first quarter and that their offensive philosophy was going to have to change. I knew they were in trouble. They had no success at all on the ground game. Like, Hassan Haskins only had 39 rushing yards. J.J. McCarthy was their second leading rusher behind them. Blake Corum wasn't able to get nothing going. Like, the rushing attack for Michigan was non-existent, and Georgia's run defense has been stout all year. Now, where I went wrong at in my preview and prediction, because I did pick Michigan to win, I'm not going to act like I didn't. And I was wrong about that. And what I went wrong at is because I felt like even if Georgia was able to shut down the rushing attack of Michigan, I thought that Cade McNamara and that Michigan passing attack could still be good enough to get some things going, because I didn't know if Georgia's secondary was all that great after what happened in the SEC championship game. But I was wrong. Kirby Smart and that Georgia defense definitely made some adjustments there, because that secondary was lights out. Cade McNamara McNamara wasn't really able to get nothing going. J.J. McCarthy came in garbage time and got a little something going, but overall, it was just a one-sided affair from that Georgia defense and the Georgia offense. Defensively, they dominated them up front. They dominated time possession. Like, Michigan could never get anything going offensively. They could never get in rhythm. And Michigan, all this year, they've had so many big plays when they were generating like 50 plus yards, either a big run or they'll catch somebody slipping, playing the run, and then they'll beat them over the top with play action. Like, you never saw that in this game. Like, there was never opportunity that Michigan had to attempt to beat Georgia over the top, because when they did try to go play action, ended up getting blown up by that Georgia defensive line. Like, the dominance in this game was on full display. Cade McNamara got sacked 4 times. If he wasn't able to escape out of a couple of them, he probably would have been sacked probably around 8 or 9, because that Georgia defensive line was on fire. And this looks like the Georgia team that we've been watching all season, dominating opponents, dominating teams. Like, my guy Juice Alert was trying to tell me we overrated Georgia before the season and during the season. Like, no, we didn't. Like, Georgia was a good team. He was trying to say, well, Georgia didn't really play nobody. And I was like, dude, like, Georgia played some of the same teams that Alabama played and beat them by a wider margin. Georgia dominated Arkansas, dominated Auburn, dominated Florida. Alabama struggled to beat Florida, struggled to beat Auburn, struggled to beat Arkansas, and Georgia pretty much handled those guys. The only team that really pushed Georgia around was Alabama. So Georgia got back to the team that we've been witnessing all year, being purely dominant, and they did it in a different fashion. If you were to told me that Georgia was going to dominate Michigan by throwing the ball at whenever with Stetson Bennett, I would have said you're crazy. Like, I did not see Stetson Bennett having this kind of performance. He had a performance for the ages. Like, he put on a brilliant display. He was accurate. He still had a play or two that made you go, okay, why would you throw that? But overall, Stetson Bennett was really impressive in this game. And you see why Kirby Smart, his offensive coordinator, have been riding and dying with him all year. You understand why. You see the mobility. You see the escapability when things break down, to be able to get outside the pocket and pick things up with his legs. Like, Stetson Bennett was phenomenal in this game. Georgia conquers, squashes, whatever you want to call this thing, massacres Michigan 34-11, and they will take on Alabama in the SEC championship. Well, in the rematch of the SEC championship game and the national championship game, when everything's on the line to see who's going to be crowned the number 1 team in the national championship game and college football or whatever. You guys get what I'm trying to say. So let me know your thoughts on this game down in the comment section down below. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure that you check out the JT Sports Podcast. Every single video that's uploaded on the channel is available in audio format on every single podcasting platform: Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. All you got to do is type in the JT Sports Podcast on any podcasting platform. It should pop up. Or you can go down to the description down below, scroll down a couple, and it will have all the links to the Apple and Spotify versions of the podcast. Make sure that you guys go ahead and check that out. And I will see you guys with another episode of the JT Sports Podcast.